welcome back to our channel. This dime looks ordinary, but it's worth $100,000. Don't spend it, watch this first. In the summer of 1967, the United States stood on the cusp of change. The country's involvement in the Vietnam War weighed heavily on the national conscience, civil rights marches swept across cities, and the world of money quietly underwent a transformation few took notice of, until years later. The dime, a coin so modest in value and size, was caught in the tide of this turbulent period. Behind the gleam of millions of 10-cent pieces struck that year lay a mistake so rare and subtle, it would go unnoticed by nearly all. Nearly all, except for one man.in Philadelphia, where the bulk of U.S. coins were minted that year, machines clattered tirelessly. Silver had just been phased out 2 years prior, and the mint, transitioning rapidly to clad compositions, was under pressure to meet public demand. Quality control was a hurried affair. Coins had to be struck and released in vast quantities. The result of this frenzy? A slip in perfection, an imperfection in metal, a misstep unnoticed, until a collector in a quiet town stumbled across it. Leonard was not a wealthy man, nor was he a renowned numismatist. He was simply a postal worker with an obsession for detail. Every evening, he would pour his spare change into a small velvet-lined tray and examine each coin under a battered magnifying glass. To his friends, it was an eccentricity. To Leonard, it was a ritual. One evening in early fall, he retrieved a handful of coins from his coat pocket. Among them, a dime from 1967 caught the dim light differently. He didn't think much of it at first. It was a Roosevelt dime, clad in nickel, standard for the post-1964 issue. But as he turned it slowly, the edges seemed off. He placed the coin under his lens and furrowed his brow. The reeded edge, that series of ridges all dimes were supposed to carry, looked faint, uneven. Not entirely missing, but softened, almost melted. Stranger still, the profile of Roosevelt appeared ever so slightly doubled, particularly near the "In God We Trust" inscription. It was not bold enough to scream an obvious error, yet not faint enough to dismiss. Leonard felt his pulse rise. Was it just wear and tear? Perhaps a damaged die? Or something else? He didn't sleep that night. He stayed up comparing his find to other dimes from the same era. Most were unremarkable. But this one? The edges remained troubling. The more he studied it, the more he noticed tiny irregularities, minute ridges that didn't align, a slightly off-center strike, and ghost-like shadows on the reverse near the torch and olive branches. It was no ordinary coin. Leonard began reaching out to local collectors and coin shops. Most shrugged him off. A few were intrigued but non-committal. It wasn't until he mailed it to a regional coin show in Illinois that things changed. The return letter was curt but electric. Unusual error. Possibly transitional die. Recommend further authentication. The phrase, transitional die, buzzed in Leonard's mind like a mosquito. Could this dime have been struck using outdated equipment meant for a prior year? Or worse, using an incorrect die in the rush to meet minting quotas? Months passed, and Leonard's pursuit of the coin's mystery became his obsession. He sent it to a leading numismatic society, who confirmed it was struck from a misaligned die, an error they hadn't catalogued in 1967 dimes before. That was when the whispers started. Rumors of a 1967 Roosevelt dime with missing or partial reading, off-center strikes, or subtle doubling began circulating in underground collector forums. The idea that during a year so focused on production, the mint had allowed an error to slip through? That was thrilling. But even more compelling was the speculation that the error might be linked to experimental dies or transitional dies being tested for future production models, making Leonard's coin potentially more than just a flawed dime, but a test piece accidentally released into public circulation. As the buzz grew, so did the coin's perceived value. At first, Leonard received casual offers, $15.50, maybe $3,100 from collectors who saw potential. Then a call came in from a private buyer in California, offering $11,200. The offer was refused. Leonard wasn't interested in parting with it, not yet. The coin had become a part of his daily life. A symbol of his patience, his eye for detail, his quiet triumph over indifference. By the mid-1980s, Leonard's error dime had gained underground celebrity status among specialists. It was catalogued in a limited journal on U.S. coin anomalies, though its full story was yet unknown. Around this time, another similar error surfaced in Oregon. This dime, too, bore partial reading and a slightly doubled Roosevelt profile. The reverse on this one, however, showed faint remnants of what seemed to be a previous year's reverse die signature, specifically, the small serif in the E of United, used prior to die updates introduced quietly by the Mint in 1968. The discovery led to a new theory. A very limited number of 1,967 dimes may have been struck using hybrid dies from earlier years, perhaps as a result of mismanagement or die mixing during the Mint's chaotic production schedules. The community was divided. Some insisted it was merely poor striking, others believed it was a true Mint error of historical significance. But those who had seen both coins, and later, a third in Pennsylvania with a strikingly similar flaw, began referring to them as the ghost dimes. The nickname stuck. Through the 90s, coin auctions occasionally listed rumored 1,967 dimes with errors, though none quite matched Leonard's original. One did sell at an East Coast show for just under $5,000, though its provenance was unclear. Meanwhile, Leonard kept his coin secured in a plain, unlabeled container within his modest home, resisting all offers and media inquiries. He had something no one else had, something he understood not just for its value, but for its story. The story turned again in 2003. A retired Mint employee, during a taped oral history project, recalled a chaotic period in late 1966 when transitional equipment was being tested for what would become new obverse dies. Some of these dies, he claimed, may have accidentally been sent to production facilities before their planned 1968 debut. It was a vague comment, lacking documents to back it up, but to those following the Ghost Dime saga, it was gasoline on fire. Could Leonard's coin be a relic of this very moment? Was it the result of premature die use, perhaps even a prototype accidentally unleashed? Suddenly, what had been seen as an oddity was being talked about in elite collecting circles as a possible mule error or test piece, created during an undocumented phase of Mint experimentation. The few other known examples gained traction, and Value.in 2006, the ghost dime phenomenon was featured in a niche numismatic podcast. A listener in Michigan contacted the host, sharing news of a coin he'd received in a roll years earlier with near-identical features, partial reading, slight doubling, and a faint mark near Roosevelt's neck not found on standard dies. The market for such coins exploded overnight. Collectors, now hunting 1967 dimes with scrutiny, began submitting dozens for grading. Most were ordinary. A few had mild mechanical doubling, easily dismissed. But a precious handful mirrored the traits of Leonard's coin to a degree that fueled speculation. As of today, the value of these error dimes has undergone remarkable evolution. Once dismissed as curiosities, they now fetch anywhere from $12,500 to over $18,000, depending on the depth of their anomalies and the clarity of their misstrikes. But Leonard's coin, still the original, still the most perfect of its flawed kind, has never been sold. An appraisal in 2018 by a private Mint historian placed its theoretical auction value at over $30,000. That number stunned even the skeptics. Yet Leonard, now aged and nearly blind, keeps it wrapped in the same velvet cloth he used the night he first examined it. He claims he still feels its ridges with his fingertips, still remembers the moment he realized he held something the Mint had not intended to exist, and yet, even this story has one final twist. In 2021, a high-resolution scan of Leonard's dime revealed something previously missed by all but the most eagle-eyed observers. Beneath the lower curl of Roosevelt's neck, embedded in the metal, was the faintest imprint of a letter S, almost ghost-like, nearly invisible to the naked eye. The Philadelphia Mint, where most 1967 dimes were struck, did not use mint marks that year due to the Coinage Act's restrictions. But San Francisco? It hadn't struck dimes for general circulation that year, or so we thought. The presence of the S threw every theory into question. Was it a misused die originally intended for San Francisco? A test piece that slipped through the cracks? Or was it an early experiment that revealed San Francisco may have quietly participated in die creation or coin testing that year, only to have its traces hidden by time? No official records confirm the existence of any 1967 dimes from San Francisco. And yet, the S mark, faint, partial, but real, whispers that history may be incomplete. That perhaps, during one of the most frenzied years in mint production, more was lost, misfiled, or hidden than we'll ever know. For collectors, the ghost dime is no longer just a curiosity. It is a window into a moment when machinery, policy, and human error collided. A whisper of imperfection, wrapped in history. And somewhere, maybe in the spare change tray of an unwitting customer or tucked in the forgotten drawer of a coin dealer, another waits to be found. In 1983, America found itself navigating an era of uncertainty and cautious optimism. The country had just emerged from a tough recession, and industries that had suffered through the early 1980s were gradually finding their footing. For the United States Mint, it was a year of pressure and pragmatism. There was no time for perfection, only production. The machinery in Philadelphia and Denver clanged with relentless intensity, churning out billions of coins meant to fuel a recovering economy. It was in this sea of metal, a blur of copper-nickel quarters, where something quietly slipped through. Something that, for years, would remain unnoticed, hidden in pockets and drawers, until one man's quiet diligence revealed its secret. Martin was not a professional collector, but a devoted hobbyist with a curious mind and a steady hand. A retired math teacher from Ohio, his routine involved long walks, crossword puzzles, and sorting change from his morning coffee run. He didn't hunt for treasures. He enjoyed patterns, errors, the unexpected in the ordinary. That was all. One summer morning, as he counted out coins to replace the ones in his drawer, a quarter clinked onto his kitchen counter in a way that made him glance twice. Its surface, under the fluorescent kitchen light, looked oddly raw, like it hadn't been fully finished. The ridges were dull. The coin lacked the typical luster of a clad quarter. It felt light, as though something inside it was missing. Curious, Martin cleaned his glasses, pulled out his loupe, and examined it closer. The date read 1983. The reverse featured the familiar eagle, wings spread wide, perched atop the bundle of arrows. It was standard in appearance, yet something was clearly not right. The rim of the coin seemed uneven, thinner in some parts, and the edge, strangely, was flat in places where reading should have been visible. Even stranger, the coin's strike looked weak, almost shallow, like the image had been gently pressed rather than forcefully stamped. Martin compared the quarter to others from 1982, 1984, and even another 1983. The difference wasn't just wear, it was something deeper. The coin lacked detail. Roosevelt's hair looked smoothed out, the eagle's feathers muddled. And as Martin tilted it back and forth, the light didn't catch it the way it should. He suspected it might be missing part of its clad layer. That was when the chase began. That he posted his observation to an online coin forum under a simple heading, 1983 quarter, weak strike or something else? The replies came quickly, some dismissing it as post-mint damage, others intrigued enough to ask for photos. One user pointed out that in 1983, the mint did not produce mint sets, meaning no coins were specially preserved for collectors. Everything minted was meant for general circulation. No special packaging, no clean strike set aside. Any coin preserved from that year had to be plucked from change and kept by chance. That made Martin's find, even in theory, more compelling. That he sent the coin off for professional grading, unsure of what to expect. Weeks passed. Then came the envelope, and within it, a verdict that both thrilled and unsettled him. Major mint error, struck on a planchet missing outer clad layer. Reverse side. The letter included a photo taken under magnification. The coin's copper core was visibly exposed on the reverse, the usual nickel sheen absent. It had been struck on a planchet, essentially the blank piece of metal, that had somehow escaped the full cladding process. This wasn't a simple misalignment. It was a production flaw born of a failure deep within the minting process. The clad layer is fused to the copper core under immense heat and pressure. When that bond fails or is never applied, the coin comes out looking pale, unfinished, and light in weight. These errors are rare, but they do happen, usually caught before they leave the mint. Martin's quarter hadn't been caught. It had circulated for years, passed through countless hands, unnoticed until now. Word spread quickly. His find was featured in a regional numismatic newsletter. Other collectors started sifting through their 1983 quarters, hoping for a similar flaw. A few emerged. One in Florida with the reverse clad layer missing but an intact obverse. Another in Nevada with only partial cladding loss, making Roosevelt's face look like it had been rubbed out by time. But Martin's coin remained the most complete example. The missing reverse clad made the eagle look like a ghost, haunting the copper surface, its arrows barely etched. By 1987, just 4 years after its minting, the 1983 error quarter had become an object of fascination in collector circles. At first, few were willing to pay more than $1,650 for such an oddity. But as the scarcity became apparent, and the stories around minting mishaps in 1983 became more well-known, prices began to rise. It helped that in 1983, the mint was still struggling with quality control. Coins from that year were notorious for weak strikes and inconsistent edges, but complete clad layer omissions? That was rare. And it made Martin's coin a benchmark for the Type.in 1991, a known specimen with similar features sold at a Midwest coin auction for $12,100. The buyer was anonymous. The seller? A truck driver who had picked it out of a soda machine in Tennessee. The idea that coins this valuable could still be floating in circulation added fuel to the fire. Coin dealers began advertising 1983 quarter roll searches, promising a chance at finding one of the elusive errors. Most found nothing. But the excitement remained. The peak of the frenzy came unexpectedly in 2009, when a private collector claimed to have found 2 1983 quarters with full obverse and reverse clad omissions, a double error. While the authenticity was debated for years, the possibility that more such pieces could exist kept the hunt alive. Martin, now in his 70s, watched with quiet amusement as coin values and rumors swirled around his discovery. He still kept the original in a small, climate-controlled box under his bookshelf. He refused to sell it. It wasn't just a coin anymore, it was a companion, a conversation starter, a fragment of forgotten history. But his story wasn't finished. In 2016, during a small numismatic symposium in Kentucky, a historian from the American Numismatic Association gave a talk on clad coinage errors. As part of his presentation, he revealed archival notes suggesting that in early 1983, there had been a known malfunction in one of the planchet delivery systems at the Philadelphia Mint. A handful of planchets that hadn't been properly fused with their nickel cladding were sent forward for striking anyway. Internal memos mentioned minimal impact, and there was no public disclosure. This hidden acknowledgement gave Martin's coin a new layer of intrigue. It wasn't just an error, it was part of a known but undocumented issue. The story now included the U.S. Mint's quiet admission of imperfection. It confirmed suspicions long held by collectors and breathed new life into the market. That year, another example sold at a heritage auction for over $24,000. The buyer called it the purest example of industrial fallout. Martin's coin was offered a certified appraisal from a private collector's estate firm. They estimated its value in the range of $42,000 to $116,000 depending on condition verification and auction timing. He politely declined again. Today, the 1983 error quarter has become a modern legend, not because it was flashy, but because it was almost invisible. A missing layer of metal, a coin no one was supposed to notice. But someone did. And in doing so, they turned a forgotten sliver of metal into a piece of history. The year was 1999. The world stood on the edge of a new millennium, teetering between the nostalgia of the past and the thrill of the future. Technology buzzed in every corner, from dial-up modems to early cell phones. The U.S. Mint, too, found itself in a moment of transformation. That year marked the beginning of the ambitious and highly anticipated 50-state quarters program, an initiative designed to honor each U.S. state with its own unique quarter design. The excitement was immense. Collectors, casual and professional alike, lined up for newly released rolls. Families kept jars specifically for state quarters. It was a nationwide phenomenon, and amidst that national frenzy, a mistake quietly slipped through. The first in the series was the Delaware quarter, bearing the image of Caesar Rodney on horseback. Mint presses roared to life in Philadelphia and Denver to meet overwhelming public demand. Billions of quarters would be struck across the 5 state designs for 1999 alone. In that tidal wave of production, precision became a luxury, not a guarantee. At the Philadelphia Mint, where the pressure was most intense, a batch of coins was created with a flaw that would take years to fully understand, an error that transformed a common commemorative quarter into a piece of numismatic folklore. For years, no one noticed. The coins passed through gas stations, laundromats, and vending machines. They jingled in children's piggy banks and vanished into couch cushions. But in a small town in Vermont, a collector named Sylvia noticed something off with a quarter she'd received in change after buying a newspaper. She wasn't looking for treasure. She'd just started her state quarter collection with her granddaughter, hoping to make memories. But the Delaware quarter in her hand looked different. The color was wrong, darker, almost bronze. The rim felt thin. She rubbed her thumb over Caesar Rodney's image, and something clicked. The coin felt lighter, and the texture wasn't right. That evening, Sylvia placed the coin under a desk lamp. The details were unusually sharp in some places, blurred in others. The edge lacked the familiar reeded ridges that U.S. quarters were known for. More curious still, the coin looked unfinished. Like it was missing something. She dug out a regular 1999 Delaware quarter from her newly started collection. Placing the two side by side, the difference was undeniable. One had a gleaming surface and reeded edge, the other was darker, flatter, and almost muted. At first, she thought it was a fake. Perhaps a novelty piece or a foreign coin mixed in by mistake. But when she weighed it at the local pharmacy's postage scale, it came in noticeably lighter. She took it to a nearby coin shop. The shop owner, a grizzled man named Reggie with decades of experience, peered through his loupe, squinted, then frowned. He said very little, only that he needed to do some research and asked to hold onto it for a few days. Reggie's phone call came 3 days later. He sounded different, quieter, more deliberate. The coin, he explained, appeared to be a genuine 1999 Delaware quarter struck on a planchet meant for a foreign coin, possibly one intended for a U.S. contracted minting of coins for another country. This would mean the wrong blank was used, smaller, thinner, and likely made of a different alloy. In the rush to mint millions of state quarters, some blanks from another production run may have accidentally found their way into the line. It was a stunning revelation. The error wasn't visual alone, it was structural. The coin had been born from the wrong body. Its DNA was foreign, yet its features were unmistakably American. That made it more than a mistake. It made it an anomaly. Word spread cautiously. The numismatic community had heard whispers of planchet errors before, but rarely tied to the freshly launched state quarter program. The thought that one of these newly minted designs, the pride of a national rollout, had emerged in a mistaken form sparked a quiet storm. Sylvia's quarter was sent for professional grading and came back certified, 1999 Delaware quarter struck on foreign planchet. Full weight and composition error. Mint state condition. The last line caused a stir. Not only was the coin rare in origin, it was in excellent condition. Soon, similar stories emerged. A quarter in Michigan showed similar features, a darker tone, reduced weight, and smooth edges. Another in Texas appeared to have been struck on a planchet intended for a dime, though without the proper dimensions. These weren't common by any measure. Out of the hundreds of millions struck that year, only a handful displayed signs of incorrect planchets. Each coin carried a slight variation, but the root cause appeared to be the same: cross-contamination in planchet supply. Experts debated the possibilities. Some speculated that the foreign blanks may have come from a batch prepared for El Salvador or Jamaica, countries whose coinage was occasionally produced by U.S. mints. Others believed the mix-up occurred during a transitional phase in the mint's planchet feed system. Without official confirmation, the cause remained a mystery, deepening the fascination. By 2006, these era coins had taken on a near-mythical status among modern coin collectors. Unlike older rarities that had been studied and priced over decades, the 1999 quarter era was still unfolding, its full impact not yet defined. Collectors paid anywhere from $1,300 to $2,000 for authenticated examples depending on the type of error and condition. But one private sale in late 2011 shocked the community. A Delaware era quarter, remarkably struck on a golden-colored planchet, sold for $8,700 to a collector from Maine who had been tracking them for years. The buyer later called it the most important quarter of the modern era. Sylvia never sold hers. It stayed in a small wooden box beside her collection with a note handwritten in pencil, the one that felt different. When asked why she kept it, she said it was the first coin her granddaughter ever helped her identify. That mattered more than the value. But others were watching. Auction houses began listing authenticated planchet-era quarters with growing frequency. Some were struck on nickel planchets, others on experimental blanks that defied exact identification. The 1999 date, the first of the state series, only added to their mystique. Then came the unexpected twist. In 2019, during a Freedom of Information Act inquiry, documents surfaced that hinted at the possibility that several batches of foreign blanks were accidentally introduced into the domestic coin production stream during early 1999. Though the documents were vague and redacted in parts, they referenced non-standard blank material observed at the Philadelphia Mint in late February of that year. This was enough for collectors to confirm what they'd long suspected: these errors weren't random flukes. They were the result of a tangible event in minting history, albeit one kept under wraps. As awareness grew, so did demand. Modern coin collectors, especially those who had grown up with the state quarters, began to see these errors not just as collectibles, but as symbols of a flawed launch of a beloved program. The irony only deepened their appeal. They were the imperfect origin of something iconic. By 2022, high-grade examples of 1999-era quarters had reached auction values between $22,000 and $39,000. Coins with certified foreign planchet strikes drew the most attention, and when one particularly crisp specimen with smooth edges and a visibly wrong composition was listed at a national coin expo, bidding erupted. The final price stunned even seasoned collectors. It sold for $94,500, paid in full by a museum interested in curating a modern U.S. minting history exhibit. It wasn't just the coin they wanted. It was the story, the human oversight, the production chaos, the beauty in the flaw. Today, the 1999 U.S. quarter era has become a cornerstone of modern numismatics. What began as a hidden mistake in the early days of a new series now represents the unpredictable charm of coin collecting. These rare errors, struck on foreign blanks, clad improperly, or missing expected features, are more than metal. They are pieces of a narrative too complex for machines to perfect, depending on the nature of the planchet error, surface quality, and certification grade. These coins now hold auction values ranging from $38,000 to $102,000. Yet for those who own them, the value lies not just in dollars, but in the way a single overlooked detail can change everything. A wrong blank. A right strike. And a story that continues to surprise. The year 2015 saw the United States in a state of continuous motion, technological advances shaping daily life, cultural conversations shifting faster than ever, and an economy both steady and uncertain in places. It was also a year that marked the later phase of the America the Beautiful Quarters program, a series of commemorative coins designed to honor national parks and historic sites across all U.S. states and territories. The Mint was deep into production by then, with 5 new designs released that year alone. Among them, Homestead in Nebraska, Kisatchie in Louisiana, Blue Ridge Parkway in North Carolina, Bombay Hook in Delaware, and Saratoga in New York. Millions of each design were struck and shipped across the country. But in the rush to meet the national rollout schedule, something else quietly entered circulation, something no one expected. Somewhere in the controlled chaos of the Denver Mint, while minting Bombay Hook quarters, a mistake slipped through unnoticed. The presses ran endlessly, machinery pressing planchets at speeds no human eye could track. Oversight teams focused on speed and consistency, but the sheer volume often overwhelmed the safeguards in place. No one suspected that among the pristine quarters lined up in neat bags, a handful carried a detail so strange it would take months, maybe years, for anyone to realize. 3 states away, in Kansas, a collector named Jordan received a fresh roll of quarters as part of his daily ritual. He wasn't a professional, nor a dealer. His passion began with Lincoln pennies passed down from his grandfather. Over time, he began collecting state quarters and then America the Beautiful designs. For Jordan, it wasn't about money, it was about continuity. History in the palm of his hand. But on that spring afternoon in 2016, one coin in the Bombay Hook roll made him pause. At first, he couldn't identify what was wrong. The quarter felt slightly rougher than the others, and its edge looked strange, not flat, but irregular. He set it aside, assuming it had just seen some rough handling. But when he looked again later, under the magnifier, his heart skipped. The edge wasn't worn, it was incomplete. Missing ridges in certain parts. Worse still, the image of the heron on the reverse, normally sharp and majestic, was muddled. The details of the marshland looked almost like a painting left out in the rain. He turned the coin over. George Washington's portrait looked thinner than usual, as though it had been stamped with hesitation. The surface lacked the reflective brightness of the others. It looked dull, unfinished. He tilted it under the lamp. There was an odd sheen to it, like it had been washed in something different. And then he noticed the weight. Lighter. Almost imperceptibly so, but lighter nonetheless. Jordan checked with his scale, one he used mostly for weighing silver coins. The quarter came in several tenths of a gram below expected. It didn't sound like much, but to him, it was significant. He weighed 5 other 2015 quarters from the same roll, and all were consistent. Only this one deviated. His instincts stirred. He checked online forums. No chatter. No matching reports. Then, he reached out to a coin grading service. Weeks passed. When the envelope returned, it included the coin in a hard, clear slab and a short statement that began with a single line: 2015 D Bombay Hook quarter, struck on defective clad planchet, incomplete bonding. The rest of the note explained that the coin had been minted on a planchet where the outer nickel-copper cladding was not fully bonded to the copper core. The result was a distorted strike with uneven weight, weaker image fidelity, and unusual toning. Jordan was stunned. This wasn't post-mint damage. It wasn't environmental wear. It was a rare minting flaw, one that almost never survived the production process. He stared at the coin, once ordinary, now elevated. A factory error that gave it new life. He learned more, digging through minting records, calling local experts. The flaw, they believed, occurred when the metal sheets used for planchet creation weren't properly bonded in the early stages of manufacture. A small batch of planchets, possibly no more than a few hundred, escaped quality control. Similar coins began to surface, just a handful. One from the Blue Ridge Parkway design, found in Utah, displayed a misaligned cladding layer that had separated slightly, revealing the copper beneath. Another, from the Homestead series, was struck on a planchet so thin it looked more like a token than a quarter. But none were as visually complete or sharp in detail as Jordan's Bombay Hook error. His coin became the reference point. Collectors began searching 2015 quarter rolls again, hoping to find their own versions. But results were inconsistent. The errors were few, and their differences wide. By 2018, awareness had grown. Numismatic blogs and YouTube channels featured the coin, often mislabeling it as an off-metal strike or a simple die error. Only seasoned experts understood the subtlety. It wasn't the die that failed, it was the foundation. The very material of the coin had betrayed its uniform design. Auction houses took note. A flawed 2015 Blue Ridge Parkway quarter fetched over $11,000 at a private auction in Denver. The buyer called it a snapshot of mechanical imperfection. Then, another twist emerged. In 2020, a coin researcher reviewing internal production memos from the Denver Mint uncovered a line about sheet inconsistencies in early 2015 clad stock, specifically referencing delays in third-party supply shipments. The memo didn't mention coin types, but timelines aligned with the Bombay Hook minting. It strongly suggested that the defective planchets Jordan's coin was struck on were part of a known material problem, one that had been quietly corrected after only a few weeks of production. This revelation added new credibility to what had previously been speculation. The errors weren't random. They stemmed from a documented lapse in the metal preparation phase. And that made the few coins that escaped even more valuable. They weren't just coins anymore, they were physical evidence of a precise moment in minting history when something went wrong, and no one caught it in time. As stories circulated, offers began to surface. Jordan turned down the first few, $3,000, $5,000, $9,000, each one slightly higher than the last. But he hesitated. Not out of greed, but because the coin had become more than just an asset. It was a personal discovery, something he found not because he was looking for value, but because he was paying attention. Still, the numbers kept climbing. By 2023, the rare 2015-era quarters, especially those tied to the clad bonding flaw, were selling for serious money. One Bombay Hook example in pristine condition sold at auction for $41,500. It had been graded as mint state 67 with clear signs of an incomplete outer layer and compromised strike detail. The bidding war lasted less than 4 minutes but drew over 25 participants from around the world. Jordan's coin remained one of the best documented specimens, and his decision to hold it only increased its legend. It was featured in a collector's journal, praised for the clarity of its flaw and the integrity of its condition. That year, another error from the same quarter series, this time from Saratoga, sold for $26,000. Analysts began predicting that as awareness continued to rise, so too would the value. Now, in collector circles, the 2015-era quarter has become a symbol of how even modern coins, built in a world of automation and quality control, can carry silent stories in their surface. Coins like Jordan's remind collectors that sometimes the mistake is the masterpiece. A flaw in metal that time almost forgot. Depending on mint condition, error clarity, and certification, these rare 2015 quarters have sold at auction for anywhere between $24,000 to $78,000. Yet for those who understand the beauty of a quiet error in a noisy system, their value goes far beyond the number. They hold the echo of a moment where perfection slipped, and history slipped in.